All right, looks like I'm live on Facebook, and it looks like I am also live coming at you on Instagram. Excellent. Hi, everybody. It is Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy, coming at you live from Chez Marron, as in the kitchen of Chez Marron, I should say, as I do almost every Wine Wednesday. And just checking in with everybody. We got a smaller show for you today, but some good stuff to talk about. So we'll go ahead and do that in just a second. I'm also here to ask or answer any wine questions you might have. We've in the past, it's everything from what goes well with what foods, the effects of barrels. We've done a couple of different shows on all these type of things. However, I'm open to any questions, existential or not. A little bit about me. I am a wine industry veteran, and I've been doing this for quite a while now, and I do everything from customer experience, training, tasting rooms, overall sales. In fact, I just picked up a new gig. I'll be working with Industry Outsider. We're a small wine broker, peddling some really incredible craft wines. So look for some of that down the road. But more than anything else, right now, I want to show off just a little bit, if I could. If you were to pick up the latest issue of Bliss Babes magazine. Now, I know you're thinking, Jeremy, maybe you're not the primary customer for this type of, or the main demographic for this type of magazine. One thing that Bliss Babes does really well, on top of giving all sorts of fashion advice and things like that, is they delve into sort of a nightlife experience and talking a lot about wine. And one of the cool things that I was able to do with them is they came to me and said, hey, we want to do something a little bit different with my friend, Russell Reyes of Kilt and Cork, and also About Town Deb, is for the three of you to go into this one little area. In this case, it happened to be in the Sierra foothills up in Sutter Creek, and hit Sutter Creek and tell us, have three different experiences. And that's exactly what happened. We went in, we met, all of us went to 2 or 3 different wineries, and each were given sort of a task to write about that experience with those wineries. And I was lucky enough to work with Greg Baiocchi over at Baiocchi Wines. He's a phenomenal winemaker, and also, more than anything else, he's just this kind of amazing human. And there began my problems, because for this nice little piece, they were asking for 500, 600 words, and I just I turned into a whole Jeremy thing. All of a sudden I started writing it a parallel to like the Odyssey, and all of a sudden Greg Baiocchi, who's this amazing winemaker, and I'll get into that in a sec, I compared his life to that of Odysseus, coming back from Troy. Needless to say, 2,000 words later, I was in a lot of trouble, and fortunately, everybody at Bliss Babes, they know what they're doing. So I actually had a lot of fun going back and forth and reshaping the piece and making it, trying to get my point, my feel across. Because one thing about the things that I do is I'm a horrible critic. For instance, another passion of mine is movies. And one year after I broke up with a girlfriend, I realized that after breaking up with her, I had a whole lot of money left over. I actually went and bought myself a ticket to South by Southwest. And I went, and South by Southwest, if you're not familiar with it, a big creative music and movie festival that happens in Austin, Texas. And if you go to the movie part of it, it's actually about 12 or 13 days. And that's what I did. I paid for the VIP ticket, which nobody does, or corporations do, but not real people. And so I went ahead and I did that. And I watched maybe something like 25 films in 11 days, and it was probably a little bit more than that. And I had this whole idea that I was going to write about this and critique films and be a movie guy. Yeah, it didn't work out that way. And as soon as I started really delving into the writing, I realized early on I have no interest in being a critic, of saying, hey, why something isn't as good as it should be. And I feel the same way about wine. For me, there's all sorts of good that happens, and that mostly the things that I want to do is I want to promote wine, and I want to share the experience of wine. Or as my catchphrase is more sharing the experience of being alive through wine. And so I got to do that a little bit with Baiocchi Wines and Greg Baiocchi. The article got trimmed down. I got my point across about my experience of tasting his wines, which were absolutely fantastic. We'll talk about that in a sec as well. However, one thing that was really interesting was his story, and I got some of that across as well, but this guy was doing just amazing things. Starting off from like not running away from home, but he like literally, picked up his bass guitar, and him and his buddy went down to LA and got into a big hair band. And, they were one of those bands that came really close to, signing and making it big, but, those things didn't happen. But they played with all the, the metalhead greats, everything from, Poison to Guns N' Roses and things like that. And then the guy, like he needed to, somehow got into skydiving. And that story is told a little bit in the article. And he, in his own way, he's like this kind of a weird adrenaline junkie. And as he got into skydiving and professional skydiving, like the teams and the whole bit, one thing that started to happen, this was down in Southern California, a lot of the Psalms that were down in LA started getting into skydiving as well. And they started trading. They started trading skydiving lessons for wine. So here was this guy who got his first taste of wine, but like really like extraordinary wine, just wine that just knocks you on your ass. And of course he's eating it with Domino's pizza, so he's having that kind of experience early on. But he certainly got bitten by the bug on it. And then, like he wanted to, he decided it was time to grow up. Now, I know a lot of times when people go through that, they think it's a good idea. They think that they're going to, leave the passion work that they've been doing and, make some money, be an adult. And of course, he immediately started doing that, and it slowly started killing him. Now, a couple of good things came of that is he actually met his wife when he decided to become an adult. He was working for this paper shredding company, and she was brought in because she was an accountant and everything was so bad, and they had to bring in outside counsel, and people were about to go to jail, and it was really a big thing. And it took him a while. And if you read the article, and I'm going to send up a link to the article after this particular show, you're going to see the results of that. And one of the things that happened is they got together. They got married, and like in a year, I mean, once they went on their first date, great things happened, and they got married, and life was going really well, and he was, working really hard at this job that he hated, and she was kind of right along beside him, until one day she pulled him aside and said, "Hey, honey, I don't like you right now. I don't like what this job has done to you." And he's standing just aghast. He doesn't know what to do. And then she does something even more incredible. She says, "I'm giving you 2 years. You need to figure out what you want to do, and I'll back you whatever it is. But you've got 2 years to change it around." He got back into wine. And he got back into wine in a big way, and he did it the right way. He started going to UC Davis. He was taking the enology courses. He found mentors in the wine industry, both farmers and winemakers, and slowly sort of started putting his, changing his life. And his wife was there with him the whole way. And it's this amazing and sort of incredible story. And I hope you get to read it. I'll show it to you. Wait, actually, it's so important. It's all the way in the back of the magazine, but still, you got a picture of him, some of his wines, and we'll talk about his wine in a second. And then, just recently, there was tragedy involved. Unfortunately, his wife being I don't know the best way to put it, the thing that inspired him to follow to rediscover himself, to follow his passions, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And unfortunately, she passed away about 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years now. And since then, Greg has been donating and creating wine to donate to the pancreatic cancer association. I don't remember the exact organization, but they're doing everything they can to fight that battle against pancreatic cancer. So, you know, we want to help support that. And he's created a wine, again, that every bottle you buy, a certain amount will go to this organization. So that alone is a good reason to go on up to Baiocchi Wines and check him out. The other reason, obviously, are the wines. Oh, man, he is... One thing that I try to make a point of in the article is that there is this sort of fearlessness that he has in not just his winemaking, but just him in general. And his wines absolutely reflect that. So even though you have these sort of mixed varietals, he's mixing maybe a French varietal with a Spanish varietal, his wines are just, they're so purposeful, and they like when you get on their when it gets on your tongue, they're big wines, and not necessarily as tannic as you might imagine, but wines that just, you know, they stay with you. They just like slowly evolve on your palate, and the finish is just absolutely wonderful. So if you get a chance to make it on up to Sutter Creek and visit our friend Greg Baiocchi at Baiocchi Wines, it's something that you will really appreciate, and you'll be happy you did it. Also, there should be something to be said for that particular area of in the winemaking, because it's changed a lot. I think that for whatever reason, when you think of the Sierra Foothills, you kind of think of El Dorado County, Apple Hill Camino, you think of Amador, to be sure, the Plymouth area and all the wineries, the wonderful wineries, Fairplay. And then you get to Sutter Creek, and it's a different thing. It seems more quaint. And what you're seeing is instead kind of this new wave of people moving in the last 5-10 years to this small little area and creating their tasting rooms there, and just, you know, blowing the doors off with their experience. I'm starting to really like that area again, also because unlike those other areas I just mentioned, there's not a lot of food. There's not a lot of other things to do. So being able to walk through, you know, Sutter Creek and go to the shops and then do wine tasting like every other place. I think there's like 11 or 13 wineries there. My buddy who has just joined, well, Russ, who's there, could tell you just a little bit better, because that's kind of more what he does. He's so good at promoting the areas. I just kind of like talk about the wines. Again, so if you're just joining me, it's Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy, and I'm talking about my article in Bliss Babe's magazine. Again, an odd place for me to write for, but I have to give them a lot of credit. They took a really big chance on my style of writing, which is certainly going to be a little bit different than some of the things they've had in the past. Again, are my friends About Town Deb and Russell Reyes from Kilton Cork have articles in that magazine as well. They're fantastic. They're worth the read. So definitely go ahead and check that out. Also, if you're just joining me, I love answering questions about wine. So if you do have any questions, I would love to hear them. I've got some people joining in, and so I want to say hi to those. Nora Fire, of course, joined. Thank you so much. She's on Instagram. Erica Blue, it's been so long. Thanks for joining the scene there. And now I'm looking up a few others. And Peggy, so Peggy just joined as well. She is one of my old co-workers from Renwood Winery as well. I believe she's still there. Answer me if you are. And boy, you know, it was really a blast working next to her. And also, she's just one of the most fun people you're going to see over at Renwood. She's been there for quite a while, and if you go up there, she'll probably be one of the people serving you. And she's an absolute delight. So Peggy, really good to see you as well. Again, Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. Oh, Camper Chef just joined. Thank you so much. Appreciate you saying hi. Also, let's go over what I'm drinking here. This is one of these, you know, one of the fun things about doing what I do, being in the industry, is I have a lot of people, you know, friends who are outside of the industry who always want to, you know, show off the wines that they like. So I just got this wine, and this is my favorite neighbor out of Paso Robles. This is a red wine blend, and like a true red wine blend, they don't tell you what's in the wine on the bottle at all. So the first thing I did is when I poured it, I looked at how dark, I mean, I hope you can see that, how dark this wine is. Oh my golly. Being that's out of Paso Robles, I'm guessing it's a little bit of Zinfandel. There is definitely some Petite Syrah in here, no doubt. And I think we're going to see a little, I'm not getting any Cabernet Franc on this, but I'll bet you there's a little Cabernet Sauvignon as well. And again, I could actually worry about what's in the wine, or I could just drink it and be grateful. And I'm all about gratitude, so I think I'm going to do that as well. Looking at other people who are joining me, thank you so much. Oh, and then Peggy is there answering as well. One of the weird things about scrolling when you're doing this on the Facebook, sometimes the feed doesn't come up the way it absolutely should. So, you know, sometimes I answer people just a little bit later. Also, I get a lot of questions after the fact, and I absolutely do read them. So if you ever have any questions, if you're watching this after the actual live broadcast, because I leave it up on this site, and I keep threatening to share my YouTube channel with people, and that will happen sometime soon. But I do go through those. So even if it's after the fact, would love to hear your questions. Some people were asking me about what, I showed off some of the wines that that I presented at Thanksgiving for family members and friends, and they all just absolutely nailed it. I mean, they were all really wonderful. This, you know, again, when starting off any type of event, sparkling is a great way to start off. I prefer mine a little bit more on the drier side, but generally anything with bubbles is a great thing to just you know, get whatever's on the palate off the palate, lift it out, and really kind of set you up for whatever is going to be coming down the pike. The red wine, actually I got this more than anything else. The red wine that I served was a Pinot Noir, and Pinot Noir, you know, when it's done right, just a little bit of fruit, some good earth, and a little bit on the lighter sort of style, goes fantastic with turkey. And it also goes really well with what we found, like the salties, the gravy and the stuffing and stuff like that. So that was actually pretty cool. Again, if you're just joining me, it's Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy, and I was talking a little bit about my article in Bliss Babes magazine about Greg Baiocchi and Baiocchi Wines up in Sutter Creek. I will be posting it on the comments just after this broadcast. One of the things that I really appreciated when I walked into his particular tasting room is that when you got up to the bar and they started presenting the wines, you looked at the tasting notes, and the tasting notes had no description of the wines. They had no description of what flavors that were supposed to be there. Instead, they gave more of a history about the wine and where the name may have come from. And I just thought that that was so incredibly cool. You know, one thing, I love talking about wines, and especially when I'm on the other side of the bar and I'm presenting wines to people. But I also don't want to like force people into thinking there is a certain style, that there are certain flavors that they should be identifying right off the bat. You know, I really like the idea of people just like putting their nose in first and foremost and just seeing what comes to them. As we've talked about in the past, you know, when we start sniffing wine and smelling wine, all of that does not go into our logic circuits, right? It absolutely goes all the way back into the memory circuits. So it's kind of interesting when I have first-time tasters, or, you know, people who don't consider themselves novices about wine. That's usually the comments that I get. That, oh my gosh, this wine reminds me of, and they talk about more, not just like a smell of like, oh, my grandmother's, you know, boysenberry pie that she would only make at Christmas time. No, it actually talks more about the experience. And then you think about, yes, that may have come to them, but now all of a sudden they're describing everything else in that scene. If it was a holiday pie, then it was also the Christmas table and, you know, the things that were on it, and it brings back all that experience, all of that emotion and of that experience. And I think that's one of the more interesting things about wine is that you know, to be good taster, to really readily identify, you really do need to be a good sort of foodie. You have to have experience. And I'll tell this story again. I think I've told it in another broadcast before, but when I was working for Deux Vignes, the winemaker, I had gone into one of these barrels, and it was a reserve Cabernet, and I put my nose into it, and all I got was this huge like vegetal note, you know. And you know, if you know about Cabernet, you know that that's a possibility early on, but that's really a note that you really don't want in the wine, a vegetal, you know, bell peppery type of thing. Cabernet Franc, yes, maybe, but in terms of Cabernet Sauvignon, not so much. So I called the winemaker over, Ken, and you know, I told him what I smelled, and he just looked at me like I was an idiot. And he said, you know what, try it again. So I did. Tried it again, same note. I couldn't get past it at all. Finally, on about the third to fourth time I was tasting it, he just, as I tasted it, he said, lead, how do you do this? Cedar, lead, pencil. And then there was like this epic shift in how I was able to categorize those particular notes. He was absolutely right. There was no bell pepper in there. Instead, there were these notes, obviously of like, you know, dried cedar, and literally like if you'd bitten on your pencil in the back of class in second grade, that isn't one of the notes that I would have gotten. To be able to identify those, you have to have experience of doing that. If somebody says, "Oh, it, you know, tastes like, you know, you get the aromas of forest floor," you know, it sounds dumb until you've actually gone camping and you've had that sort of experience of like, you know, walking out of your tent at like 6 o'clock in the morning and there's just a hint of mist and you're, you know, walking to wherever and you get those sort of forest notes. Those are things that are, you know, that actually do come out in various wines. So, you know, if you need advice on like what to do next to have a, you know, to have a good or a pleasant or informative tasting experience, you know, it's get out there and start eating and start tasting and try things maybe that you haven't tried before. Maybe there's certain things that you had never, you know, you've heard about, like escargot or something like that. You know, go out and try those type of things, and hopefully you get that into your sort of you're in your repertoire, you know, but all of a sudden you're able to identify those little things. Boy, I just went off on a rant, didn't I? Again, I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. We're coming up, we're a little bit past the time. It's we've gone a little over 20 minutes. I usually like to keep them, you know, from 20 minutes to half an hour. But I really appreciate you watching and letting me spout off about my article in here. You know, unfortunately, I don't write enough. I should be writing a whole lot more about my experience with wine, and this was a really kind of fun exercise to go ahead and do that with. Again, if you need or have any questions regarding about, hey, you know, what wines to serve, what type of quantities, things like that, I'm always open for that type of discussion. And what do we go here? Seafood pairs with, Camper Chef is saying, seafood pairs very well with several different wines. I couldn't agree more, actually. And one of the fun things I like to do is finding red wines that actually pair well with seafood. With shellfish, I generally stay with white, but you know, things like salmon, and depending on how I make a certain type of tilapia, definitely I can throw some red wine at it. So I love having questions like and comments like that. So please, throw them down. I will, if I don't get to them during the broadcast, I'll certainly bring them up the next time around. It's been a lot of fun. I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys.